Okay, guys, let's go back chronology to the period. We're talking about, first of all, we're talking about the Greek. Okay, when the Greek split, when Alexander the Great he died, his kingdom split into two. We know that the Ptolemies, which is they remained in Egypt, and the Seleucid or the Seleucids remained in north of Israel. Okay, Banias is a place where they had a major battle between the Ptolemies and between the Seleucids here. Okay, it's a place where they built a temple, pagan temple, Pan from pan flute, from music, the god of music, rhythm. You know, he was half god and half human. Okay, and their temple used to be here. Okay, that's the temple actually, and that's the rock. And over there, it used to be a water flows from the Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is over there on that side, but no more water. But this is where they used to sacrifice their goats, and they clean their goats in the water inside. Okay, this is what they used to here, and that's the area, the place where also Peter and the disciples came, and of course, who's going to speak about Peter later on about Peter. Okay, so it's called Banias. From Pan, later it becomes Banias, Pan, and Banias. Okay? We're talking about 3rd century BC, 2nd century BC, and then, of course, we have the Herod Antipas, and we have not the Herod Great. Of course, the Herod Great, when he died, his kingdom was divided to Herod Philippi and Herod Antipas. So it's called Herod Philippi because this is part of the Herod Philip territory. Herod Antipas, mainly he took Judah and Samaria. Herod Philippi, he took the region of Galilee and the Golan Heights. Okay, that's why it's also called Caesarea Philippi. So both names, Banias or Caesarea Philippi. Okay?
We can. Okay, very good. Thank you, Benny. Real quick, a couple other things I wanted to know. One, this was a very corrupt place. No good Jew would ever come up this direction. There's intentionality in Jesus coming this direction with his disciples. It's probably a full day's walk. It's probably a 9-hour walk to come from there to here. Mount Hermon, I said this is the base of it. It has 5 peaks. And then it's usually snow-capped about 9 months out of the year. On a typical day, you can actually see it. So I think I saw sunblock in my eyes, so I'll be crying. And this is where I told you possibly the transfiguration may have taken place after that account, other than Mount Tabor. This would have been the other location, maybe on one of the peaks further up.
Mount Hermon.
The other thing, I said this is a very corrupt place. It was so corrupt that it was actually on one of the Roman coins, so they knew about it. There was multiple temples here. One of the interesting ones, they had the dancing goats, which to tell today, I don't quite get how they used to do that. But the interesting one is this. This was a cave that they believe was literally led to the gates of hell. It was kind of the intro to it.
Hades.
So, yeah, so I don't want to talk about that because Justin's going to get to it. But one of the things they do, they'd come and sacrifice, and you saw the water coming out from there. If they would come and they would sacrifice and blood came out from the river there, they'd sacrifice like a goat or something, and blood came out, that means the gods rejected their sacrifice. So they would up their game at that point and maybe bring a child instead and sacrifice it. So when I talk about corruption, it was a very corrupt place. And again, no good Jew would have actually come up to here. So Jesus coming in, and I don't want to go on just because he's going to talk about it, but the intentionality of what he's doing in that conversation is very interesting. Did you want to say anything here?
I just think the other thing that's really interesting about this, so this cave would have been bigger, would have come out more. Obviously, it's collapsed some. So remember what we said. What did we say about dark and deep water? That was a sign of evil. That was a sign of chaos. So part of the reason why Hades, the thought was this would have been so dark and so deep, it would have been the gateway to hell. Again, that's part of the reason why this is so unique. So, but having that visual of imagining this filled up and then streaming, you can see some of the mosaic floor even of the temple here, streaming underneath with those kinds of decisions to be made. And this would have been considered Las Vegas.
Correct.
Like this is the Vegas of the Jewish community. That's why no God-honoring Jew would be here.
By the way, the cave came out a lot further than this. Earthquakes, of course, destroyed it later on, I think in the 7th century. Today, there's a really nice picture there. I recommend you guys taking a look at it. You'll see the dancing ghost to your right, the temple of Pan and things that, just take maybe a picture. You can look at it later. Take a few minutes here, and then we're going to kind of walk through the ruins to go find a spot to sing together.
Oh, one other thing. I want you to see that place up there. I'll probably refer to it. See that green field and patch up there?
Yeah.
Right where the trees are, just that little clearing. Have that a little bit in your mind. Okay?
Which one?
Just that green, the grass. I'll explain.
2 o'clock.
The grass up there.
The grass up there.
All right, take a few pictures as we walk through and just make our way.
Steve, you okay?
Feels real nice and shade here.
Not bad. I just checking on you, bud. I did. With God of music. What's the best you did?
Change your religion.
They have different gods, right? Wellness.
They had different names.
Yeah.
But
Let's move along, boys. I don't know, man.
Sit right there.
I think this will be it.
All right, so this is we wanted you to see that because we're going to read the scripture where this takes place. And again, I'm going to read a few things that helps connect our journey a little bit. We're in Matthew 16. And one of the things that happens, there's a couple significant moments about this story, this place, why this happens there that is really unique. But I want to help you kind of see things that you didn't see before so you can imagine. Again, the disciples to come up here would have been about a day's hike, about a full day's. So if you look at it, where were they before? Matthew 16, verse 5. When they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread, right? So the lake, the Sea of Galilee, that is the lake. Like this is where they would have taken a journey up here to experience this place, right? And so I'm going to skip down to what happened at verse 13 after that little section. So I want you now, you've come here, Caesarea Philippi, and this is the experience that Jesus brings his young disciples. Almost all of them were under the age of 20. Most likely only Peter was above the age of 18, and we'll talk about that in Capernaum of why we believe that. So all of these young men are brought to Las Vegas, and we read it this way. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say this Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" You know, this is one of these moments. What I think about why I was pointing out the grass is I think one of the writers would say actually that grass would be the closest Jesus would have gotten with these young men. because you got to remember all the uncleanliness that was happening. There was obviously other temples. There was the sheeps and the goats and the dancing goats, which is a place where people would have sex with goats. Like, this is what is going on in this space. And so he's bringing them into the region, and what we've seen Jesus do over and over again is he uses whatever is in front of them to teach them. He was quite a visible teacher. And so you can imagine him looking down, asking this question to his disciples. And Peter answered this question. What about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Now think about that. When we were on yesterday morning, we're on the Sea of Galilee early in their time. The first response of, who is this man? Right? That's what we read first. And then the second time on the water, truly, this must be. And now when Jesus asks them, who do you say I am? They respond, Simon Peter responds, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Blessed are you, Jesus replied, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone he was the Messiah. Now I want to read this, just one more verse. Is then from that time on, Jesus began to explain to the disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. I don't know if when now you read it and you see that or you hear those words, but sometimes we've always interpreted that the rock on which God would build his church on is Peter, the person. That he would be the beginning of the church, which there's definitely some major things there, but I think we understand it a little bit more if we consider where he is. Jesus is here in the sight of the gates of Hades. The gates of Hades are right there, where they say darkness comes up from the water, the most evil things. So where the entry point of Hades coming into the world, what does Jesus say he's going to do? He's going to build his church on the gates of Hades, on that rock. And I can only imagine, like, for me, what I think this scripture came more alive if it isn't just Jesus saying it's about Peter or people in general, but it was more of Jesus saying that my kingdom is going to overcome the other things of this world. While people are thinking sacrifices of children and animals will give them the life that they desire, I'm going to bring my kingdom in my church, and I'm going to put it in that place. And again, I think one of the things Jesus is always doing in these moments is that he's kind of reminding us how often we allow the things of the world in the most worldly of worldly places be the things that give us value, or where we search for peace or satisfaction, because that's all what was being sought here. Whatever immoral thing you desired, you had. And yet Jesus says, in that very darkness, I'm going to bring something else. I'm going to bring my church on the rock, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. It's just one of the most beautiful things, I think, of Jesus bringing the word shalom, or peace. Like we talked about that before, peace in the chaos. This is chaos. And Jesus is saying, my kingdom is a kingdom of peace. My kingdom is actually an offensive strategy, not a defensive. Where there is chaos, I bring peace that the world doesn't know but deeply desires. And so I just think for all of us, I wanted to kind of, one of the reasons why I like bringing us here is to get this picture of Jesus was strategic and he was passionate about doing it. He was willing to walk a day's walk just to make a significant point about how far his kingdom will go. It will go to the gates of Hades. And it's one of the most beautiful things that he does. And so for me, I don't know for you, but for me, when I think about it, I'm like, where are the areas that I've allowed God to be like kind of boxed in, and where does he want to be more aggressive or offensive in my life, and taking down the areas that I give him? I think we've talked a lot as a group about some of the things that have weighed us down, some of the hurt, some of the habits, some of the hang-ups that we've carried with us. And I do think that this is one of the most beautiful images, that God doesn't just want to sit silent, but he wants to go after those things. And what's really incredible is if you look from Matthew 16, where we just read, all the way through the end of Jesus giving his life on the cross, this is actually his journey from the most northern part of the kingdom all the way to Jerusalem. Every stop, every chapter, every next place that he visits is one stop closer to Jerusalem where he'll sacrifice his life. So it's almost like he brought himself and his disciples to the farthest regions, says, this is what my church is about. This is who I am. This is what I want you to do. And then he begins to move towards the place where he would become the sacrificial lamb, his ultimate mission. And so for me, it's just this beautiful picture if he was willing to come here as he began to take him where he would ultimately go, which is peace and shalom in our lives through his sacrifice. So for me, I think about my past, I think about my hurts, I think about the things that weighed me down, my addictions that I'll share more about in our story time, the addictions that I allowed to plague in my life, and I only employed a defensive strategy. And Jesus was willing to bring shalom into that chaos rather than me holding on and saying, I hope I can get through it. So that's why I love this place. It's why I think it's so powerful. And I can only imagine just like we're a little distance away, but those disciples being like, I can't believe you brought us here. And then you're saying, this is your strategy and you're calling us to do it. And Jesus was willing to go to the darkest places to bring peace. And I think he sends that out for us as well. So that's my heart for this space. Any questions or thoughts? In a matter of 4 minutes?
So this is still very much an active space when Jesus was at.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Very active.
Yeah,
Obnoxious.
there would have been another temple up the hill from where Pan is.